morning to all those folks looking to make career changes. It's a brand new day to grind and take action to get into that dream job that you've always wanted. This is your host, Minal Bukhari, and welcome back to 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom. On this podcast, I try to get you insights directly from some of the leading individuals in the industry who work for some of the best companies out there in the world. So you could crack the code to get you that dream job that you've always wanted. Today, we have someone who has over a decade of experience in banking and project finance in emerging markets across Europe, Central Asia, Middle East, and North Africa, with in-depth expertise in infrastructure, in particular renewable energy. So, if you're into sustainability and want to pursue a career in that, you might want to turn up the volume. Please give a round of applause for Waleed Saraf. Hi Waleed, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hi, Manal. Good morning. No, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So, Waleed, can you start by telling us a little about yourself and IFC, which is member of the World Bank Group and the largest global development institution focused on exclusion to the private sector in developing countries?
Sure. No, happy to do that. So I've actually joined IFC about 11 years ago. I joined right after business school, and time flies. I joined maybe thinking I joined for a year or 2 years at max, and it's been 11 years, and I can say that time's flown by. Interestingly, I joined initially in Dubai, covering the Middle East and North Africa region, where at that point in time, there was this whole new wave of renewables, and I was actually lucky to be involved in the initiation of renewables in Jordan, where, for example, I was part of the financing team that financed the first ever wind farm in the country, the first ever solar power plants in the country. And then about 5 years ago, I moved to Istanbul, where I've been now focusing on Europe and Central Asia. And as part of my journey within the region here, I've been working on a diverse set of teams, covering, for example, the first renewable energy project in Armenia, and most recently, the first ever solar financing in Uzbekistan as well. So happy to talk a bit more about what I do and more details about my journey.
Of course. So I think everyone would be interested to hear what's the most interesting project that you worked on up to date, and why was it like something that you always remember?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, very much focused on the private sector here, right? Trying to bring in private sector development and private sector investment into these countries. And so, for example, maybe going back to my first experience in Jordan, where we were financing a very large wind project in the country. So my role essentially, at that point in time, was leading a team of environmental and social consultants, technical engineers, lawyers, to try to close the first financing in the country. And some of the things that we were looking at were the first for the region, right? So this project that I was working on was not just the first for Jordan, but it's actually the first in the country. And there were many stumbling blocks, right? For example, it wasn't just IFC that was providing the funds and the financing for this project. There were several other lenders, and trying to convince other lenders to join us in the first of its kind financing was a challenge in itself. And then dealing with all sorts of interesting issues like environmental issues. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that we always look at when developing wind farm projects and financing them is the impact it could have on biodiversity, like birds. And what we learned as part of our due diligence was that there's a certain griffon vulture that's present in Jordan, which is actually endangered species. And so what we had to do was, try to see how we could save them. And so there were various things and ways of how we could try to ensure that these griffon vultures would not get extinct. And the challenge was that the problems, the turbines were quite high, but when these griffon vultures were actually flying to get food, they would just look straight, and they wouldn't actually be. They were looking down, and they wouldn't be looking straight. So the risk was that they would just get right into the wind turbine and die. And so some of the things that we tried to do to resolve this issue was to make these vulture restaurants, where you would actually have sacrifice animals or get meat, etc., and put them aside away from the turbines to alter their behavior so that they would actually start flying there. So these are some of the interesting things that we deal with. Either it's griffin vultures in Jordan, or it's raptors in Uzbekistan. So all these sorts of very interesting issues.
That sounds very interesting, especially the psychological element that you guys actually deployed. So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate that. But I think one thing that I'd also like to know is, as in like, what I know is that you when you were in London, you used to work with Google, then you worked with a company in UAE, and now you're at IFC in Istanbul. So I'd like to hear more about how you got there, what caused you to work in World Bank, and just like if someone is trying to get into World Bank, what would you tell them to work on just to get that dream job with World Bank if they ever do want to apply for it?
Sure. No, certainly. I think, my suggestion would be at the end of the day, in terms of reflecting on my own journey, I think what's important is to figure out, what really motivates you, what inspires you, and where you're most comfortable, right? And so it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but I mean, at the end of the day, the people that you spend your time with at the office, I mean, really, it's important to make sure that, you really do want to spend time with them, right? Because you're spending ample amounts of time with them. And so if you get into the sort of the wrong sort of crowd where you don't really enjoy the interactions, it's just not worth it. And so for me, what was key was that, one, development was very important to me. And so, the kind of impact that IFC, the World Bank Group has, that was important to me. And secondly, in my interactions with the people that I was interacting with at IFC, I kind of felt that these are the people that kind of resonate with me. These are the kind of people I want to work with me, and which is why when I joined, I've stayed for this long. And so I mean, my suggestion to people looking for roles in the World Bank is, one is, be prepared. If you are committed to the mission, committed to development, this kind of shows through. It shows in your resume, it shows in your interviews. And so being prepared really helps. Reaching out to people who work within the organization, talking to them, better understanding the company, better understanding what they do, that really helps. And of course, when choosing a company, always try to get a better understanding of the culture and whether that's something that resonates with you and whether it's important to you or not. So these are the kind of things that I would suggest people look into as they try to navigate their career.
So you mentioned that if you're really interested in development, it shows through your resume, it shows through your cover letter. Can you elaborate more on that as to how, as in like, what could they do to like make it show through?
Sure. No, I mean, I'll tell you one thing, right? So, for example, I'm involved in a lot of hiring, and for example, when somebody says they're very interested in development and volunteer work, and then when you look at the resume and they've never been involved in any volunteer work, that's kind of a bit odd, right? And then for somebody who's talks about how they want to work in different countries and travel around the world, working in different countries, ensuring that they work on certain projects, sort of development-oriented projects, or somebody who's interested in renewable energy. I mean, they really have to show why they're interested in renewable energy, right? And to date, what have you done to actually prepare you for this kind of a role? And the thing is, I mean, within IFC, for example, we typically hire, people who've worked for 2 to 3 years after undergrad, and so it's a bit more easier to show in terms of whether they really are interested by looking at the kind of experience they have, by looking at their interests, and of course, what they've been doing.
Okay, thank you so much. That is definitely helpful. And for people who are looking for jobs for World Bank or IFC specifically, this would be a key takeaway for you guys, which is to focus on actually doing research on the company, looking for whether the vision aligns with what you want to do, and looking for people that you'd want to spend time with and making connections. So thank you so much, Waleed. It was a pleasure having you as a guest. If there's anything else that you'd like to add for the guests out there who are looking for jobs, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. No, I think the key is just preparation. Just be prepared. Try to look for opportunities which you're really interested in, as opposed to just trying to scatter your applications everywhere. Focus is important. Focus helps. It helps you better prepare more, and this kind of shines through in the interviews as well. And then at the same time, just also would like to mention that everybody goes through rejections. I went through hundreds of rejections as well, so that's also part of the application process. Sometimes it's just not the right fit, and that's fine, right? I mean, it's not the right fit for them. It's not the right fit for you. And just finally, I think what's also important to mention is, when you're doing an interview, it's not just the company that's trying to see if you're the right fit, but it's also you trying to figure out whether this company is the right fit for you. So it's an interview for both sets of people to interact and figure out what's the right way going forward. And so do take that as an opportunity.
Okay, perfect. Well, our 10 minutes are up, Waleed. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show. This was really helpful.